I don't know if you've ever seen these tier maker videos where they kind of rate different things from like suburb all the way down to like, or superior all the way down to like D, and they rate them. How do you feel about these things? And the idea is that it kind of flushes out, what's important to you. And I will say that, I work at a very big church. I also work with and constantly am talking to people of all sizes of churches all the time. So I'm in that world. I came to faith at a church under 500, but this is coming from my perspective. And so as I talk about different elements of maybe online church or digital church and even rate different maybe products or offerings, it's just meant to come from my own perspective. And so this is fun. I've seen this done on all sorts of things, and they tend to be a lot of fun, and you get interesting um, opinions shared. And so I got some espresso kind of fired up here from my newer Nespresso machine that I use, and I hope I don't say anything that gets me in trouble, especially with a friend who maybe works at one of these companies or maybe believe something contrary to what I believe on this. So the whole idea of this is supposed to be a tier system. S is superior, meaning it's top tier, God mode almost, and then A, B, C, D, and D, and then the idea is A is better than B, and vice versa, kind of like grading in grade schools here in the United States. And so I have different items at the bottom, and then the idea is I drag and I put it in the spot, and I kind of at the end have a ranking. And so this is meant to be fun. I'm going to kind of go in order and I'll share my opinions, why I feel, and I might even change my mind as I go. So first, Zoom. I think churches don't really understand um, just how important Zoom is. I know a lot of churches had some, when they think about Zoom, they think about, COVID and they don't want to do anything on Zoom, but I still think it is a very A type of product, and churches should consider using Zoom because it allows you to decentralize. I mean, many forget how hard it was to do video meeting online pre Zoom. Skype was there, but it was, you had to be in contact and it was rough. But Zoom made it so easy with a single click. And so, even though maybe you have some bad acid reflex when you think of Zoom, I think there's a lot of things you can do as a church that Zoom is amazing for. My own church, we do this with our staff where we meet in person once a month, but every other the second time a month we meet on Zoom because it's just convenient. And I think with training and events, I think Zoom is underutilized, and I think it's maybe not superior at the top, but it's still up there. And I know a lot of people when you mention Zoom, they're like, well, but especially as you think about people doing more remote work, I still think in programming and offerings in your church, you should really think about it. Um, TV apps. Oh, this is a hard one. Right. Some of you may not know this, but I did. I am. I am a part owner of a TV app company. Technically, me and my friends we started something called TV App Church. Uh, I don't know, 7 8 years ago, and I really believe in TV apps. I think they are really underutilized by the church market. Because it's meant for a core user. I'm talking about Apple TV, Amazon Fire, Roku. I think as more and more people cord cut and move, and you see this with like the NFL ticket moving to YouTube TV, and you have Amazon offering Thursday night games, and you have probably Apple TV is going to bid on the NBA games, and you can have more and more people moving to these apps. And I think having a dedicated experience for TV apps is really important. I still think it's a growing market. You see it like there still requires this internet savviness for it. The idea is that as maybe the early majority move to TV apps, meaning like to streaming and away from the cable packages, because really cable packages are kind of holding strong. They're decreasing, but the idea is that your grandparents really don't want to move to like Apple TV. They like the IR, kind of remote. It's hard. I have YouTube TV, and sometimes I don't love it. I miss my direct TV remote. And so I think as more people move, it's going to be more and more important. I think it does cost a lot still to kind of get on that. And actually that was the one thing with the company that I had. We were trying to make it more affordable, and I think there's still a market there because what's great about TV apps is that they're dedicated users. It's for your core, and so you can use it for streaming your weekend services, small group material, host special events, decentralized events where you can like, hey, any you can give somebody Roku. We do this at our church with some of our events. It's like just get a Roku stick and a hotspot, and you can do a pop-up church service. And so I think there's a lot of potential there. I think it's still maybe not for most churches, but I think it's getting there. And so, but I would put it at C right now, even though it kind of hurts me because I love TV apps. I love I use my Google TV app all the time for stuff, and I have a Roku and all that. So okay, I don't think I've gotten myself in trouble just yet. WhatsApp. I think WhatsApp is oh man. I'm going to put this up here. This is going to be controversial, maybe superior. I think WhatsApp is so underutilized. Most Americans don't really know it because, for whatever reason, I think there's a lot of history here with like the American like, and I correct me if I'm wrong on this. Somebody in the comments will probably correct me, but there's something to do with like the way our internet, our texting service expanded, where we had phones, and then because monopolies, many of us like me when I first had texting on my phone plan, I had to pay $20 a month. And then eventually the idea is that because of that, texting for a long time was something connected to your phone, where a lot of these international markets didn't have that growth, that learning curve. And so they moved straight into instant messaging through like WhatsApp and all these platforms. And so I think a lot of people don't use it because in America, a lot of our texting is done through our iOS and so forth. But internationally, a lot of plans didn't have that covered and you had to pay for it. And so like, and they couldn't afford it. And so a lot of these platforms like WhatsApp, and now you have new ones like um, Telegram and Signal, and which are more encrypted. But I think WhatsApp is really underutilized. I use it for a couple of things in my community, mainly for international. And I think WhatsApp is a huge, Meta owns them now. It's huge. But to be able to have groups and start things in threads, it's so great. So have volunteer teams where instead of like when you lose a volunteer, you have to create a new thread. You just do it all through WhatsApp. I think WhatsApp is so seamless. It's so great for managing groups. There are some limitations to the size of groups. I think it's 250. And so as the groups get bigger, but WhatsApp is such a dynamic, and I think it's underutilized, and I think it's amazing. And I want to do more in WhatsApp. I wish I could have larger groups, which they will, but I think WhatsApp is amazing. Podcasts. I mean, I think podcasts are really important. I probably put it at B. I think most churches should just have a podcast, an audio podcast. They don't need to start with live streaming and recording video. Just, I tell most churches that are just starting, like, just do a superior audio podcast, and you can get it on your podcast app on Spotify really seamlessly. You can do it yourself, or you can use a subscription where they like, make sure it's posted all the right places. But I think podcasts are great. Also, debriefs. There's churches doing this. The first one in my area, I remember doing this with Sandals Church. They did something called the debrief, where they would the person teaching that week with a couple of their hosts would debrief the weekend message and kind of like unpack it. So it was kind of like this extended conversation, kind of like a Joe Rogan vibe where you're just talking about stuff. I think pod formats like that, or audio formats, are so important for all sorts of reasons, mainly because it's passive listening. People can be driving, working. Sometimes I listen to podcasts in the background on my TV or on my phone where I'm just I'm working. And so it doesn't require as much focus as a video. And so I think that is like there's more people watching it, people are getting more comfortable with it. It's obviously an emerging market. I think churches don't think about the potential with podcasts. I would put it B personally, but I think for a lot of churches, it actually might be S. But I think utilizing it. My own church, we're exploring, we have a podcast network, but we're talking about beefing it up, making it stronger. But I think churches really should think about that more. Okay. Meta ads. So I'm a favoritism on this. I think there's just this reality of churches are dealing with, especially in the US and around this declining of nature. Less people are just showing up to your church because more people are unchurched, and maybe, COVID accelerated some trends where people weren't already committed and now they just don't go. And I think we're going to have to be more strategic about going to people. And obviously, the Holy Spirit is calling and drawing people. And obviously, we're called to evangelize, but I think churches are going to have to get more creative with advertising to people. And I think Meta's platform to be able to run targeted ads in like a 5-10 mile radius of your church are super compelling. Now, I don't think that ad should be like, come to my church on Sunday. I think it should be like a, hey, how can I pray for you? Or are you going through something tough? Send us a message, start dialogues. And I think it's like such an amazing platform. You can spend like $50 a month and reach people. I'm always running an ad to kind of grow our audience. I'm running some ads right now with our own Instagram account. But to be able to create ads is so compelling, especially messenger ads. I'm going to keep saying that, but I mean, I've been doing this for like 8 years, and I think it's underutilized by most churches. Usually, when I'm talking to a church that's a startup church or even a small medium church, I'm like, start running ads. It's not that hard. You could figure it out with YouTube and some training. You just need a credit card. Just do it through the business manager tools, not on Facebook or Instagram because you have less targeting parameters. But I think they are underutilized by the church generally. Oh, live streaming. I'm gonna get myself in trouble on this one. Honestly, I'm gonna put live streaming just on C. I think the amount of money it takes to live stream something and to build a quality control it is so high. I mean, I could tell you myself, like, I work at a giga church technically, not just a mega church, a giga church. And the things that go wrong in a live stream are just, it gives you a headache. I can't tell you how many times like I just get so frustrated. I'm like, why can't we have so, and it's because it's just hard. It takes a lot. You're encoding video, you're doing a lot. And I think providing a live stream, let's say on Facebook or YouTube or one of these platforms, I think is important, like in the sense of the long haul. I think there's something about building control your experience and providing an experience where people get to see your whole experience at your church. It gets a little complicated when you're multi-site and all these things, especially, most churches are in mobile type of settings where they don't have great lighting and they don't have great bandwidth. My own church has 20 locations, and a lot of the locations, it's really complicated to get internet there. We have to experiment with all sorts of stuff. But I just don't think it's worth it for many churches. Now, I think if you can do it well, it can be super compelling, but I think it also could just be on demand. Like, I just don't think the live stream experience is needed. It's like a feature for members. And you can get pretty close by just capturing and editing and doing audio only or a video later. Now, if you can do it well, it's great. This is something we do. Our largest location has a live stream, but we create something custom just for online that's edited on Saturday nights. But I don't think it's as relevant. I would much rather you do like an Instagram live conversation and talk about something versus making people watch an event in a room. I know that might counter a lot of people in this space, but I'm not saying stop your live stream. I think that there's something about that, but who's watching that? Why does it need to be live? And that's why it's like, if it's all this hurdle, a lot of this stuff costs a lot of money to execute, the encoders, all this, the providers, and in some churches, they want people in the room. So what if you still offer the message or the experience, but just you offer it on Sunday night or Monday and you just do an edit, and it might be more affordable? Maybe not. Once you have live stream set up, it's pretty automatic. But these are the things to wrestle through as a church. And I can't answer that for your church, but I know we're doing less live streaming of our full worship services and more custom services for YouTube. And our live experiences are going to be more YouTube and maybe Instagram live type of conversations where it's more engaging and specific for that platform. Facebook, generally, man, I'm going to put it down in D. I don't think Facebook is dying. I think Facebook will be here to stay. It will be like your contacts, we link with Instagram and all this, but I just, outside of the Meta ad platform, I think Facebook itself, especially here in the US, is becoming less relevant in the sense of like investing a ton of time. Now, the exception is depending your target. If your target is using Facebook, then you got to lean into that. But I find, like, I have a Facebook group that has about 12,000 people in it. And it's just the amount of people that see my post in there is like a couple hundred. And it's just the more that they've created ads and kind of monetized it, it's less relevant. It's just like I can't. And so we're leaning way more into Instagram. I don't really, we still provide our service on our Facebook page. I still monitor our messages there. There's things we do. I think it's really easy to cross post and engage, but it's just not a platform that we think a lot. Now, you might be in a country or in an area where Facebook's really important. There are places because of ministries that I've worked with and I know and friends. I know there are places like, especially in the Middle East, that Facebook is still really relevant because of just the saturation. And sometimes data plans are Facebook data is free, and so, but even in those places, more of that audience is moving to Instagram and even still on platforms like Snapchat and stuff like that. But I am less on Facebook. I think it's really easy to maintain it, but I spend most of my time on Instagram, and even in our own ministry, we're spending more time on Instagram. And I would tell most churches, you know, if you're reaching this demographic, just focus in on um, Instagram. Websites, I would say probably B. I think your website is important. I don't think it's the end all of everything. I think you got to think about your website as something that is being um, indexed by Google and even now Chat GGP and all these search engines, these large language models, and people are discovering your church for the first time, and they're landing on your website and they're making decisions about who you are. And you have to think about your homepage in a way of like, does it represent you well? Is there easy times? Is there a click to go to the address? And you know, I think websites sometimes become like crowded and there's too much, and it really should just be a couple things. I always like to bring up the example where like the homepage of Apple's website is owned by the marketing department, and all the other pages are like owned by that department, but they own it because that's meant for the community. Just really manage your homepage really strategically. I think it's still really important. It's really affordable to have a website. What's hard is it's hard to maintain a website. So I think with tools like a Squarespace or a Wix or whatever tool you want, just make sure it's relevant. I think it's important. You can't ignore it. I do think as you grow as a ministry, to have more things you control, because like YouTube, Meta, all these platforms could change their rules, and maybe you can't stream anymore. And so like it's something to think about, like having a web. So even like, for example, a simple thing, you might live stream on YouTube, but or upload to YouTube, but maybe you still have a page on your website where you embed it where people can watch, so that you get the habit. It might be your website slash online or whatever you want to call it. But I do think a website is really important and is underutilized by most, undervalued. I always like to bring the example that a lot of churches think about like maintaining their lawn and their building and make sure signs out, but like, who's thinking about your web page, your homepage? And sometimes if you don't think about it, like you don't think about it for months or years, and then you find like, oh, that still says that up there. But I think it's really important. Oh, this is really, I think this is B. Um, this is maps. This is really under thought about, and I think I would put it as B. We're thinking about when people are searching for your church, they are probably going to Apple Maps or Google Maps. And does that information populate correctly? And are you thinking about that, especially if you moved addresses? What are the reviews there? This is something you should be thinking about. And it could be hard to claim. I've gone through this myself, but just making sure that the right information is there. And so this is something that I think churches just don't think about. But this is what we do when we go places and restaurants. And I was just going to I was getting lunch a couple days ago, and it was New Year's Day, and we were going somewhere, and the question was this place closed or open, because it was it was a holiday, and the information on their Apple Maps was wrong. And so it could be a pain, or even like simple stuff. Like I live in a place where my house kind of straddles two streets, and sometimes if I put in the address, it will actually put on the other side of my house, which is the wrong side. But being aware, does your churches, if I take directions, where does it take me? Does it take me to this parking lot or that parking lot? And this is stuff you got to like think about, but think about your maps. Um, I am gonna put this is push pay, and you could also put, again, you can put Tidely or any giving type of company here, we're like collecting tithes and giving. I think digital tithes and getting people to set up automated tithes and all the reporting and all the stuff that comes along with that is super, super important. I think I would rate it as B. Some of these companies have all sorts of practices and different things. Some of them, like a push pay, can at times, depending the size of the church, can feel expensive. But here's the deal. I think that if you invest into them wisely, they will handle a part of your church's kind of spiritual discipline super well. I know people at PushPay. I think they're good. I think people at Tidely are great. I think I'm not really in here to say who's better, who's not, but I think what you have to understand is that there's a lot of ways to do this. And I've just noticed churches that use these tools tend to get more tithes. And I don't think it's because they're doing something wrong. I think that they know how to do this stuff. And so working with an expert is super important. And I think if you're not doing online giving or working with somebody, you tend to get what you pay for. And I think it could be worth the investment in using one of these tools. And there's honestly so many of these tools. I just know PushPay is one of the dominant one. Tiley is another one. And there's a lot out there, but I would really encourage you to use something that don't be too scared about the price, maybe test it out. The hardest part about, I think, a lot of these tithing tools, whatever you want to call them, giving tools, is that it's hard to change. So when you pick one, make sure you're going to commit to it for the next 3 to 5 years, because it's really hard to maintain two databases and merging them. I've been through that with churches, and it could be such a pain. YouTube, I would put it A. I just think YouTube is such obviously an obvious like growth factor. It's growing, it's important. More and more people are moving there. More and more people are cutting their cable packages. I find this, like, I pay for Max and um Netflix and Peacock and all these different things. And I find I just watch YouTube. I have YouTube Premium and I just watch YouTube a lot. And I think this is going to be more and more true. I watch it with my kids. I have a 13-year-old, 10 and 7. They just watch YouTube. They pay attention to Disney Plus and all these things, but they watch YouTube. And I think your church having content on there is going to be more and more important. I don't think it needs to be like live streaming. I think the short form content, thinking about this, I think it's underutilized by most churches. They're just uploading a sermon and that's it. You really got to think about how do you create stuff and put stuff there. And so maybe just not moving people to your church's website, but maybe putting stuff on there so people can discover it. I also think I did a whole video. You can check it out on my YouTube channel about how to create YouTube ads. I think that's underutilized as well, especially if you have content that's compelling. It's a really cool, newer kind of way to kind of reach new people. This is going to be controversial. I am going to so this is the church online platform. These are OGs in the online church space. I'm going to put it down at C. They kind of have this strategy where you can have a custom page where you can schedule content based off of streaming provider or like a YouTube video where you can schedule things. I think generally this experience for a lot of churches is kind of a old media strategy. It's kind of like cable, where you would like buy, you know, Lord of the Rings or like Seinfeld, and you would just schedule it out like a TV channel. And I just don't think for most churches this cable rebroadcast strategy makes a lot of sense. Like, just make it live or make it on demand. Why do I have to schedule an event? It's kind of like a webinar. Webinars are just less relevant. Now, it doesn't mean they can't be. And I think there are churches that are super strategic, like Life Church is very good at this, and other churches, Elevation Church, are very good at this. But why not just lean completely into a YouTube Live or some other, on-demand experience? And I think it's because when you're there, there's a community element. And so, like, for my church, that community element more happens in our small groups, not on the stream. And I think to do the live experience really good, you have to have a lot of things going on. And so Elevation Church and Life Church, they do it well because they're good at it. And I think for most churches, the church online platform is just very, I would say, dated. And I don't think, at least the current iteration, I love what they do. I think there's a lot of churches that do a lot of cool stuff on that. I just think it's down there at the C now. Now I have no idea what they're scheming up. That team there is amazing. What they did with Church Online when they launched it for churches for free is amazing, and it was a godsend to churches during COVID. But I think moving forward, um, it's less and less relevant. TikTok, um, this is an interesting one because I never know what's going to happen with this platform. I think it's B, probably. I think obviously most churches aren't using TikTok. The thing with TikTok, it continues to be one of the best platforms to kind of go viral on. I mean, you can reach people in a crazy way because TikTok Crowd is always running A and B testing, and anything can pop, meaning anything can go viral. It really is an amazing platform to be discovered in your community. Now, the hard part is you can't really control where you're discovered. You can run TikTok ads. I ran a couple TikTok ads, and it's pretty easy, but it's a lot of reach, and you don't know what it means. And so I don't. I think it's something that churches should think about, especially if you're trying to skew a little younger. It's a platform I think churches should be posting on. I will say that there is a lot of diciness on this platform in the sense of how, like, the controversy around it's a China company and all this stuff. And I think that there's a lot of potential for it to be shut down or restricted in some way. And this has already happened in other countries, like, let's say Pakistan, and I mean, like India and stuff. I think it's India. And I think it'd be crazy for that to happen, especially in an election year. But I think it's important, but I think you got to be aware of it. I don't really worry about who has my information. Everybody has your information, but I do think that there is something about having this like external company, this external country that can control what's in a feed. And it's already been documented they can control this. They did this with the Houston Rockets, where when the GM of the Houston Rockets said something negative about China, if you were in China, it was restricted. If you were outside of China, it wasn't. And it was interesting to watch what they could control in TikTok. And so I bring that up because, like, I think what is in your feed is becoming more controversial. Mark Zuckerberg has done this with Meta. He's put more restrictions so, like, Russian influence doesn't happen. And I think this would become more controversial. So not that I think it's going to get shut down, but I think it's a possibility. And so I think your church has to be aware. But I think it's a fun platform to be on, especially if you're trying to reach younger, and at least having sermon clips. And there's a lot of cool people out there that talk about this, but I think it's something to think about. CRMs, I, you know, not surprising. I think CRMs are up there in A. I think churches generally are not aware of how important it is to aggregate your data. And there are a lot of CRMs. I'm not going to name CRMs by name here because there's too many. Every time I talk to a church, oh, I didn't know that one's that. I'm constantly learning about CRMs, but to be able to aggregate your data and have all your member data in one place so that you can message people, text them, run reports like who are all the married people, who are all the single people, and to be able to, how many people have given this last year, that all comes into a really good integrated CRM. And I think having a solid CRM is really important. I think there's a lot of competitive CRMs out there now. And I think paying for something good, even getting away from something that's bad, is really, really important. And ultimately, a good CRM kind of integrates most of these tools. And I could tell you pros and cons of all of them that are out there, but I think having a good CRM that you and your volunteers and your team know how to use is really important. Getting data away from being on Google Sheets and Excel sheets. You got to get away from that. You got to get this stuff because it's nothing better to be able to, like, log in somewhere, and if somebody emails you or calls you and you go on a record and like they've been attending here. It's so important. Even for smaller churches, I think it's really important, and they tend to be super affordable. So I think churches, they don't like using like how to manage data. It's not a fun, sexy thing to talk about, but I think it's really important. Um, Yelp. I'm gonna put this down to D. I put this down just for fun because I was just on a call with a church, a smaller church, and they were talking to me about Yelp, how important it is. I don't think Yelp is something. I think you should be aware what is said about your church on Yelp. I don't think I would do Yelp ads or anything. I honestly, I haven't used it in a couple years, but I've worked with a lot of people that they don't love Yelp ads and how they performed. They have some interesting history on this, but I think understand people go to Yelp primarily, at least in the US. A lot of the habits are around like finding a restaurant. I don't think they're necessarily using it primarily to find a church. I think they could. This is why you got to be aware of it, but I don't think you should think too much about it. It's something to consider though. I'm going to put Instagram up there as superior, or I think it's just a really fun platform. I think it's obviously huge. It's going to continue to grow, and I think the hard part is that if you've seen a lot of numbers and growth, you can get distracted by, well, on this platform, I get this many views on TikTok or on YouTube on this. But the thing about Instagram is that depending on your target demographic, this is where people are, especially if you're reaching people in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. And I think there's just really good engagement. And so, like, for example, I love Twitter or X, but I know most people at my church aren't using that. I use Twitter X for tech stuff and basketball and crypto stuff I follow. But I know not most of my people there. So I might love X or Twitter, but it's not really helpful for the church generally. But Instagram is. And so I think it's great. And then the ability to run ads and private message type of things with your community is so important. I really believe it. This is not going to be like super shocking, but mobile apps, um, I am going to put them down in D. I think mobile apps are really important, but it's the age-old thing where like most people are using 8 apps in a month. And most mobile app offerings for churches are just honestly really bad. People aren't using the app. Usually it's like media focused, maybe notifications, but are you really paying attention to your notifications on your phone? And a lot of times, like I turn them off, and the media stuff I can just find somewhere else. Now, if it's like an add-on and it's free or whatever, integrate, whatever, I don't think you need to really think much about it. But I think people push people to the mobile app, but there's not a much to do on the mobile app. And like my church, we have a mobile app. It's super custom. We spent, a lot of resources to try to dial it in, but it's because it's custom, it really is integrated. But I think for the average church, like I wouldn't think twice about getting a mobile app. I'm not trying to, if you have it, cool, but I don't like, people like that, oh, this is going to be the, it's right there, but like most of the time it's just like a media player and some blogs, and it's like, are you actually using it? That's the question. Think about the things that you are using. And I would start this by looking at the data. I was actually just talking to a church about this, and I was kind of saying, like, I don't think a lot about mobile apps. And they looked at their data, and based off how many people were attending and how many people actually loaded the app, it was actually quite a few. And so it meant that a lot of people were using their app percentage wise. And in that case, I would say then I would figure out how can you make your mobile app better and more engaging for your member. And then lastly, virtual reality. Um, I have two answers for this. I think virtual reality and augmented reality, all this, like I actually have a Quest 3 right here behind me. Um, I I think generally right now it's D for most churches. It's not something churches should be thinking about, because I think the market, it's still an early an early forming market. But the more and more I use this stuff, the more I'm just convinced it's going to be something here in the future. Now the question is the horizon, like when does that happen? My own church, we're exploring some stuff with some partners that we're going to launch some stuff probably this year in VR, a little bit more permanent, in VR chat. But that's because we have resources and we have some people that are strategic leaders in this space. I think of Life Church, they launched their is it All Space VR experience, and then All Space VR got shut down. It's hard. It's hard. It's when you're doing stuff early, you sometimes take big swings and it fails. Now I always like to use the example. I remember there was a book about chronicling the history of ESPN, and they talked about the idea that ESPN tried to launch their own phone, and they spent millions of dollars, on launching their own phone. This is before the iPhone, and essentially it failed miserably. Amazon did a similar thing. They tried to launch their own phone and it failed miserably. But essentially, what happens at ESPN, what they did is they took all those learnings and that investment of dollars in launching their phone, and they launched one of the first early mobile-friendly websites. And if you remember, 10, 15 years ago, ESPN.com was great. Their mobile site was amazing. And the same thing with Amazon. They use a lot of those learnings to build an amazing app. And so I think sometimes when you take big swings, you learn a lot in the process that you iterate on. And so I think, like for me, I believe in virtual reality. I think a lot of the passive experience stuff where you have the new Quest has like three camera so that you can see around, and Apple Vision is going to be big. I think we're getting somewhere. I think we're still probably, 5 years out from something practical, but I really do believe in it personally, and it's something I'm still kind of leaning in on. So yeah, I guess not too surprising. I'm trying to think if I would change anything here. Um, I don't think so. I think that's my rating. So sorry if you disagree with me. Maybe comment if I left out something, and if I do this in the future, I can add that to the list. But that's my tier of online church digital ministry kind of tier making from superior all the way to D. Hope it was good, and thanks for having some espresso with me.